Hey nerds, welcome to Nerdtastic. It's already our second video of the series, but we're already covering one of my most favorite D&D monsters of all time. Stick around for another Monsterlytics. So Aboleths have been around for basically the inception of your fantasy world, at least according to 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. They've been there before gods were even walking the earth. Imagine coming in with an associate's degree to an employer, and you're like, guys, I've got this covered. Maybe a few years later, somebody with a master's comes in and goes, no. They've been around so long that they've been able to enslave all the mortals that were around them, and then kind of grew that cult following and worship and loyalty, and then all of a sudden actual gods showed up and said, you know what, we'll take it from here. You guys are actually being controlled by the Aboleths, and we're going to need you to stop doing that. Thank you very much. Now, come on over here. We'll get you taken care of. No. Bad Aboleth. Bad. At least I think it's kind of like that. The crazy part is like, they spend a lot of their time in water or, deep oceans or anything like that because they typically prefer to swim. They're even able to read your mind and gain your loyalty based on trying to fulfill your desires because they know your desires. If they knew mine, eventually, someday, hell, maybe even in your campaign, these Aboleths in their massive cities that have been around for eons could eventually work towards a plot to overthrow the gods. I mean, we're talking about creatures that even if you kill them, they will come back and they will remember and you will be dead because they'll just wait until you die. So even that little tiny grudge that they had, like, you know what? I remembered when Marcellus stabbed me. Yeah, I died. It took me quite a while to come back. Where is he? I want to kill him. What, he's dead? He was only a male human? I'll never forget you, Marcellus. Anywho, I think it's time we get into the Monsterlytics for the creature, shall we? Let's begin. Now, given in the book, they are essentially tied in a way to the elemental plane of water. They are actually not elementals. They are aberrations. Let's quickly go over what an aberration is. Aberrations are essentially like alien-like beings that have their own innate certain special traits about them. Typically the ones that are most famous are Aboleths, Beholders, and Mind Flayers. Okay, so for DC 10 we've got the passive information, right? So we'll go ahead and start there. We have Aboleth. The languages that the Aboleth speaks is deep speech, which is very, very uncommon. If you have a character who has tons of languages and you're trying to try every single language in the book to speak to this thing, it doesn't have to necessarily talk to you. It's going to try to find the weak-willed ones and then talk in their head and get them under control because you apparently are really smart because you have 5 languages under your belt. Lastly, they have a ground speed of 10 feet. Yeah, they're normally swimmers. I'd like to imagine it's kind of like Ursula when she transformed to go after Ariel in The Little Mermaid. She's kind of crawling with her tentacles on the floor. She's not going to win any sprints, but she's able to move. And for DC 15, you may have encountered one before. Again, this is where we go over the proficiencies, additional movement, and common attacks. Now, the Aboleth is proficient in history and perception, which perception's pretty easy. It has 3 eyes, and dark vision. We'll get to that later. But the history part is, I know it's because they have memories that never fade. They will remember, and they pass on that information to their offspring. They're actually also a creature that are proficient in saving throws as well. Constitution, intelligence, and wisdom. Now this makes sense because it is a pretty hardy creature living underneath the sea, water pressure and all that. But also it is incredibly intelligent. It has the ability to not only speak to you telepathically, but it can control your mind. And wisdom, they've been around forever. Now, as far as movement speed, 40 feet. A little bit faster than a typical movement speed, but you got to keep in mind one very important piece of information. They're an underwater creature. Swimming comes naturally to them. Swimming, however, does not come naturally to your adventurer. They'll be half speed swimming at this point, and so it's going to be very easy to, if they split up, be able to go after one individually. Their main attack is a multi-attack, which is with their tentacles. Now, typically, the body of an Aboleth, you've got the head with the 3 eyes and the mouth and those teeth, and then a long body. And the longer the body, the older the Aboleth is. There are some Grand Elder Aboleths that are enormous. I believe it said that they were about 20 feet long average, but Elder Aboleths that are like in the deep cities could be way longer than that, and weigh a whole lot more. Now, besides that main stalk, that main brain of the Aboleth, there are numerous tentacles, typically 3, at least according to the picture in the monster manual. There's 3 tentacles that come off of the creature, and that makes sense for its multi-attack. Now, there are some extras that come with each individual tentacle attack, and we'll cover those in just a little bit, but we're going to kind of get through the main check first. After the multi-attack with the tentacles, you've got the tail attack. Now, this is a pretty weak attack. I mean, weak in the sense of there's no multi-attack for its tail, but we will get to something that is useful with its tail a little bit later. And the last feature, the last action for the Aboleth is the enslave action. So I think it's the cornerstone of the Aboleth to me. It's something where you can essentially charm a creature. Now, granted, when players make checks, I don't really reveal the specifics of the Aboleth's enslavement. Now, going back to the tentacle attack, beyond its normal bludgeoning damage, there is something extra that goes along with it that makes it a very formidable foe. Whenever it hits a creature, that creature has to make a Constitution save or become diseased. Now, this is beyond the normal disease status you see in the player's handbook. After 10 rounds or 1 minute, their skin becomes translucent and slimy, and they can only be healed while underwater. And that's not good, seeing as how eventually you will be not underwater. Unless you run an underwater campaign, in which that kind of diminishes the challenge, don't you think? The real kicker for the disease is once they're out of the water and they're back in the surface world, they would have to apply water to themselves every 10 minutes, or they're going to start taking damage. It's not one of those diseases that's immediately apparent, and it's really nice to spring on those who aren't quite knowledgeable about the Aboleth. Now, touching back on the enslave action real quick, of course, we DMs know that it's only about 3 times a day, but a lot of really cool campaign ideas kind of come into my head and building these sort of campaign arcs involving the Aboleth and its enslavement ability. Because if you think about it, they've been alive for a very long time, and every day they could enslave up to at least 3 times. And they would have to make sure that they enslave at least every day or every other day if they could, because if obviously that subject takes damage, then there's a chance that they might not be enslaved anymore, especially if they are sent out further than a mile to actually do the bidding of the Aboleth and gather information that it otherwise could not. So you've got this ancient being inside of some sized body of water that is able to communicate through the mind to mortals. For those who aren't as strong-willed and strong of mind, able to establish a connection to which then they can send them out. It's like Varys with all the spiders in the Game of Thrones, like having eyes and ears everywhere. It's a lot of possibilities for really awesome knowledge in a campaign setting. And for DC 20 and Live to Tell the Tale, they have a dark vision of 120 feet, which makes sense, they're underwater. They're also amphibious, which means that they can breathe water and air. Mucus Cloud is a really fun ability where when it's underwater, it's surrounded by this transformative, disgusting mucus. And if you, the adventurer, hit it with an attack or touch it while you're within 5 feet of it, then you have to make a Constitution save or become diseased. And this disease, you can only breathe underwater. Not very good for when you finish killing the Aboleth. You're going to have to hang out a bit. Now, when you are a melee combatant and you're within 5 feet, the great thing is the Aboleth has a reach with its tentacles and its tail of 10 feet. It can keep you and attack you at bay, and if you're right up next to it, sure, you might not take any damage from the mucus cloud, but if you become diseased, you cannot breathe and immediately begin suffocating once you're no longer underwater. And there are many ways to make you not underwater. And probing telepathy. They're able to find those that they can communicate with and find their innermost desires, and with the knowledge that the Aboleth has for being around for as long as it has, is probably going to be able to give it information that it's looking for in exchange for its servitude. So the Aboleth finally doesn't have any resistances or immunities, and they are not spellcasting capable. And DC 25, for all your knowledge needs, this is where I would put the legendary actions and the lair actions, but you don't have to go into specifics. You don't have to tell them how many times the Aboleth can do something, or if they have to do something and then do something. They can't do it 2 times in a row. That's just kind of breaks the illusion. But you can tell them what they are known for. With Detect, the 3 eyes on top of the Aboleth's head are constantly looking around. It's able to use an action on that. It's also able to use an action on its tail, in addition to its tentacles, to make a massive tail swack for anybody who's trying to sneak up behind and do the old stab. And lastly, the Psychic Drain. Now this one's a hefty one. It costs 2 actions. It is a source for the Aboleth to regain hit points. And as a creature of the deep, you're wanting to last as long as possible against people that are trying to attack you. You've got the upper hand, and this is a way to keep it. Would you want to try to enslave the wise or smart wizard with his books and his ability to recall spells and incantations? Or would you rather try to do it against Grok, the barbarian or fighter that is pretty sure that the only way to defeat you is to swing its axe enough times, eventually you will fall? Now, the good thing about that is you can enslave the not-so-wise ones, because the not-so-wise ones might be the stronger ones, and you can then send them after the very, very squishy wizard or sorcerer. Now, what really makes the Aboleth a boss to me is the lair actions. This is our first creature in the monster manual that not only has legendary actions, but also lair actions. This is a lot to take in as a second monster, and I'm just now noticing this video might be a little bit longer because of it. The lair actions are pretty nice because they're an additional help to the DM to make the encounter challenging but not too overpowering. Now, the Aboleth's first lair action is to be able to cast Phantasmal Force to any creature within 60 feet that it can see. The good part about this is if there are some that may fail some sort of check, you could try to at least lock them down with a Phantasmal Force while you're focusing individually on each individual creature that's trying to kill you. Next action, of course, is something that if you're fighting them already underwater, it's not really beneficial for you, the Aboleth, to do this, but it is kind of cool where if they are, let's say, if you are in a giant lake and they're standing on the surface, peering over the lake, it is possible that you would be able to reach and pull them down into it, which is scary as. And the final lair action is one where it's the Aboleth is, if it's in water and you're in water as well, it's like electricity to water. It sends out a psychic rage blast, and any creature that is in contact with that water has to make a wisdom save or take more psychic damage. The thing about this one is you can't just go psychic damage, psychic damage, psychic damage. You actually have to alternate between those. A lot of times it's probably going to be the first one and the last one, back and forth. This is where the players, even though they may not know what the lair actions can do, can really lock down the Aboleth. Because if they all manage to save against a Phantasmal Force and can't have it cast on them again, and them already being underwater, you can't really use the pool's lair action to pull them in or knock them prone or anything like that. And you can't use the psychic damage repeatedly. You have to alternate between them. That could really just mess you up as a DM. Finally, one of the good things that they've put into 5th edition to help with the legendary creatures, the lair actions and all of that, is the regional effects that the lair has. For the Aboleth, anything within 1 mile of its lair is wet and slimy, and it's all difficult terrain. Water sources that are nearby are just supernaturally just enemies of the Aboleth, and let's be honest, if you're mortal, you're an enemy. The water that you drink as an enemy immediately gets thrown back up. That is not only awesome sounding, but it's pretty dangerous, seeing as how you need water every day to survive, along with food that you look for. And think about this. How much wildlife would be around if they would immediately throw up water? What a great way to intimidate your players. And the last one is that within 1 mile of its lair, the Aboleth as an action can be able to cast an illusory image of itself wherever it's been before, or if it can look out of an enslaved creature's eyes, it can be able to project itself there, and it can speak telepathically, move as if it were there, but of course, if someone were to try to attack it, then the image would disappear. What a great setup that is, to be able to have this big bad floating around, where you can see it, you know it's coming, you can kind of plan for it, but in the end. So the Aboleth, with all of its cool features and all of its awesome attacks and all of its awesome plot that it can make, you would think that it would be a higher challenge, right? No. It is a CR or challenge rating 10 creature. Now for me, I see this as a good opportunity for the Aboleth. It's not the end boss, but it is one hell of a middle boss. And that about wraps it up for this episode of Monsterlytics on the Aboleth. Now, if you have ever had this awesome creature in one of your campaigns, please make sure to put it in the comments below, and I will be more than happy to read through all of them, because I love the Aboleth that much. If I had a shirt that said, "I heart Aboleths," I would be wearing it today, but I don't have it. I really want to thank you guys for watching this video. Subscribe for more videos, as we are going to go alphabetically, if you haven't noticed, through the Monster Manual, and then probably on to other books. And I always appreciate any likes, and any feedback you guys have whatsoever. It's been a while since I've shot videos, and the support for the D&D community is huge, and I love everybody, except for you know who you are. Until next time, nerds, I bid you adieu.